For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the morning of August 15, 1991, 9-year-old Timothy James, T.J. Walker set out from his grandfather's cabin in the remote mountain village of Cedar Ridge, Montana, for what should have been another day exploring the vast wilderness he loved. The adventurous boy with sandy brown hair and bright blue eyes was known throughout their isolated community for his fearless exploration and uncanny ability to navigate challenging terrain. Despite one of the most extensive search operations in Montana's history involving hundreds of professional searchers and volunteers, no trace of TJ was ever found. 3 years later, geologist Dr. Elena Martinez's technical cave exploration in the Bear Creek Cave Complex would uncover a makeshift campsite that finally revealed the remarkable truth about the missing boy's fate. The morning of August 15, 1991, dawned clear and crisp in the remote mountain village of Cedar Ridge, Montana, where the thin air at 6,800 feet above sea level carried the scent of pine trees and the promise of another scorching summer day. For 9-year-old Timothy James, T.J. Walker, this Thursday would begin like countless others in his young life, helping his grandfather with morning chores before exploring the vast wilderness that surrounded their isolated community. Cedar Ridge was home to only 347 residents, most of whom had lived in the area for generations, sustaining themselves through a combination of logging, hunting, fishing, and small-scale farming. The village was accessible only by a single winding mountain road that connected to the nearest town, Glacier Falls, 47 miles away through treacherous terrain that became impassable during winter months. Chapter 1. The Mountain Village. TJ stood 4 feet 3 inches tall with sandy brown hair that seemed permanently tousled from his outdoor adventures, and bright blue eyes that reflected his insatiable curiosity about the natural world around him. He was known throughout Cedar Ridge for his fearless exploration of the surrounding forests and his uncanny ability to navigate terrain that challenged even experienced adults. The Walker family had been among Cedar Ridge's founding families in 1923, when TJ's great-grandfather had established a small logging operation in the pristine wilderness of northwestern Montana. TJ lived with his grandfather, Samuel Walker, a 67-year-old retired logger who had become the boy's guardian after TJ's parents died in a car accident 3 years earlier. Samuel Walker was a respected figure in Cedar Ridge, known for his knowledge of the surrounding wilderness and his skills as a hunting and fishing guide for the occasional visitors who made the difficult journey to their remote community. He had been teaching TJ the traditional skills of mountain living: hunting, fishing, tracking, plant identification, and wilderness survival. TJ's formal education took place in Cedar Ridge's one-room schoolhouse, where teacher Martha Rodriguez instructed 12 children ranging from kindergarten through 8th grade. The school operated from September through May, with students often missing days during harsh weather or when family obligations required their assistance with seasonal work. However, summer provided TJ with the freedom to pursue his passion for exploring the vast wilderness that surrounded Cedar Ridge. The area included dense forests of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir, crystal-clear mountain streams, and an extensive network of caves and rock formations that had been carved by millennia of geological activity. TJ's daily routine during summer vacation typically began at 6 a.m. when he would help his grandfather with morning chores, feeding their small flock of chickens, checking their vegetable garden, and splitting firewood for their wood-burning stove. After breakfast, TJ was free to explore, with the understanding that he would return home by sunset. The 9-year-old had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of the terrain within a 5-mile radius of Cedar Ridge. He knew the locations of hidden springs, wildlife trails, seasonal berry patches, and numerous caves and rock shelters that dotted the mountainous landscape. His grandfather had taught him to read natural signs and to navigate by landmarks and compass bearings. TJ's exploration activities were not unusual for children in Cedar Ridge, where self-reliance and wilderness skills were considered essential life abilities. However, TJ was particularly adventurous, often venturing farther from the village than other children and displaying a maturity and competence that impressed even the adult residents. On the morning of August 15th, TJ completed his chores and ate breakfast with his grandfather, discussing his plans to explore a section of the forest to the northeast of the village where he had recently discovered what appeared to be an abandoned mining claim from the early 1900s. The area was approximately 3 miles from Cedar Ridge and included interesting rock formations that TJ wanted to investigate more thoroughly. Samuel Walker was comfortable with TJ's planned expedition, as the boy had explored similar areas many times and had always demonstrated good judgment about weather conditions, terrain hazards, and time management. TJ carried his usual exploration kit, a small backpack containing water, snacks, a compass, a whistle, and a basic first aid kit. TJ left the Walker cabin at 8:30 a.m., following a well-worn trail that led northeast from Cedar Ridge toward the higher elevations of the surrounding mountains. Several residents observed TJ heading out on his adventure, noting that he seemed excited about his planned exploration and was carrying his usual equipment. The trail TJ followed was one of several that radiated from Cedar Ridge, originally created by wildlife and later used by loggers and hunters accessing different areas of the forest. The path was well marked for the first mile, where it passed through areas regularly used by village residents for hunting and wood gathering. Beyond the 1-mile mark, the trail became less distinct and required more advanced navigation skills to follow safely. However, TJ had traveled this route multiple times and was familiar with the landmarks and terrain features that marked the way to his destination. The area TJ planned to explore included a series of limestone cliffs and rock formations that contained numerous caves and crevices. The geological features had been created over thousands of years by water erosion and seismic activity, resulting in a complex landscape that was both beautiful and potentially dangerous for inexperienced explorers. TJ had discovered several small caves in the area during previous expeditions, though none had been large enough for significant exploration. However, he had noticed features that suggested the presence of larger cave systems that might be accessible through careful investigation of the rock formations. The weather on August 15th was ideal for outdoor activities, with clear skies, mild temperatures, and no indication of the sudden thunderstorms that could make mountain exploration dangerous. The forecast called for continued fair weather through the weekend, eliminating weather-related concerns about TJ's planned adventure. At approximately 10 a.m., TJ was observed by logger Marcus Rodriguez, no relation to the teacher, who was working in a timber cutting area about 2 miles from Cedar Ridge. Rodriguez waved to TJ as the boy passed by on the trail, noting that TJ appeared to be in good spirits and was making good time toward his destination. However, TJ Walker never returned to Cedar Ridge that evening. When sunset arrived at 8:30 p.m. without any sign of the boy, Samuel Walker became concerned and contacted other village residents to organize a search party. The close-knit community immediately mobilized to look for TJ, though the approaching darkness limited the effectiveness of their initial efforts. The search began with teams following the known trails that TJ might have used, calling his name and listening for whistle signals that might indicate his location. However, the vast wilderness surrounding Cedar Ridge included hundreds of square miles of rugged terrain where a small boy could easily become lost or injured. As midnight approached with no sign of TJ, the village residents realized that they were facing a serious emergency that would require outside assistance. The nearest law enforcement agency was the Flathead County Sheriff's Office, located 47 miles away in Glacier Falls, accessible only by the dangerous mountain road. Samuel Walker contacted the sheriff's office at 12:45 a.m. on August 16th, reporting his grandson missing and requesting immediate assistance with search and rescue operations. However, the response would be delayed until daylight due to the hazardous nature of the mountain road during nighttime hours. The investigation into TJ Walker's disappearance was about to begin, but already the case was presenting unique challenges due to the remote location and the vast wilderness area that would need to be searched. The answers to what had happened to the adventurous 9-year-old lay hidden in the mountains surrounding Cedar Ridge, waiting in a place where no one would think to look for 3 long years. Chapter 2. The Search Begins. Friday, August 16, 1991, began with the arrival of the first law enforcement personnel in Cedar Ridge at 7:15 a.m. Sheriff's Deputy Michael Harrison had made the treacherous journey from Glacier Falls in his 4-wheel drive vehicle, navigating the winding mountain road that was the only connection between the remote village and the outside world. Deputy Harrison was an experienced outdoorsman who had grown up in northwestern Montana and was familiar with the challenges of conducting search and rescue operations in the state's vast wilderness areas. However, even his extensive experience had not prepared him for the scope of the terrain that would need to be searched to locate 9-year-old TJ Walker. The area surrounding Cedar Ridge encompassed approximately 500 square miles of rugged mountain terrain, including dense forests, steep cliffs, rocky outcroppings, and numerous water features ranging from small streams to alpine lakes. The elevation ranged from the village's 6,800 feet to peaks exceeding 9,000 feet, creating diverse ecosystems and weather patterns that could change rapidly. Deputy Harrison's first priority was to organize the volunteer search teams that had been forming throughout the night. The Cedar Ridge residents were experienced in wilderness activities, but search and rescue operations required coordination and systematic coverage to be effective. Without proper organization, well-meaning volunteers could interfere with each other's efforts or even become lost themselves. The search was organized into teams of 4 to 6 people, each assigned to specific areas based on their familiarity with the terrain and their physical capabilities. Team leaders were equipped with two-way radios that allowed communication with the command post established at the Cedar Ridge Community Center. Samuel Walker provided Deputy Harrison with detailed information about TJ's planned route and destination, along with a comprehensive assessment of the boy's wilderness skills and likely behavior if he had become lost or injured. Samuel emphasized that TJ was experienced and resourceful, making it unlikely that he had simply lost his way on familiar trails. The initial search focused on the trail that TJ had been following toward the abandoned mining claim area. Search teams systematically examined the route, looking for any signs that TJ had deviated from his planned path or had encountered problems during his journey. The first significant discovery came at approximately 10:30 a.m. when searchers found TJ's backpack beside the trail about 2.5 miles from Cedar Ridge. The pack was intact and appeared to have been deliberately placed rather than dropped accidentally. However, TJ himself was nowhere to be found in the immediate area. The discovery of the backpack provided both hope and concern for the search teams. The fact that the pack was intact suggested that TJ had not been attacked by wildlife or had suffered a serious accident that would have scattered his belongings. However, the deliberate placement of the pack raised questions about why TJ would have abandoned his essential supplies. Deputy Harrison called for additional resources from the Flathead County Sheriff's Office, including K-9 units and specialized search and rescue teams with experience in mountain terrain. However, the remote location meant that additional personnel would not arrive until late afternoon, limiting the immediate search capabilities. The search teams continued their systematic examination of the area around where TJ's backpack had been found. The terrain included several game trails that branched off from the main path, leading to areas that TJ might have explored if something had caught his attention. One area of particular interest was a series of limestone cliffs located approximately half a mile northeast of where the backpack was discovered. The cliffs were known to contain caves and rock formations that would have appealed to TJ's curiosity about underground features and geological formations. However, the cliff area was also potentially dangerous, with loose rock, hidden crevices, and caves that could pose serious hazards to inexperienced explorers. The search teams approached this area with caution, as any attempt to locate TJ could put additional people at risk if proper safety procedures were not followed. The initial examination of the cliff area revealed several small caves and rock shelters, though none showed obvious signs of recent human activity. The searchers called TJ's name repeatedly and listened for any sounds that might indicate his presence, but received no response. As afternoon approached, additional resources began arriving from Glacier Falls and other locations. The Montana State Police provided helicopter support for aerial reconnaissance, while specialized cave rescue teams prepared to examine underground features that ground teams could not safely access. The helicopter search provided a broader perspective on the vast terrain that needed to be covered, but also emphasized the enormous challenge facing the search teams. The aerial observation revealed dozens of potential locations where a small boy could be hidden or trapped, including caves, ravines, dense forest areas, and rocky outcroppings. The K-9 units arrived at 4 p.m. and were immediately deployed to track TJ's scent from the location where his backpack had been found. The dogs picked up a trail that led toward the limestone cliffs, confirming the searchers' suspicions that TJ had explored that area. However, the scent trail became confused in the rocky terrain near the cliffs, where wind patterns and geological features made tracking difficult. The dogs indicated that TJ had been in the area, but could not provide specific direction about where he might have gone or what might have happened to him. As darkness approached on August 16th, the search teams were forced to suspend active operations due to safety concerns. The rocky terrain and cave systems were dangerous enough during daylight hours, Attempting to continue the search in darkness would have put additional lives at risk. The command post remained active throughout the night, with volunteers monitoring radio communications and coordinating logistics for the next day's search efforts. Additional resources were being mobilized from throughout Montana, including specialized cave rescue teams and experienced mountain climbers. Samuel Walker spent the night providing detailed maps and information about the area's geography to incoming search teams. His knowledge of the terrain was invaluable for planning safe and effective search strategies, though even his extensive experience could not eliminate the dangers inherent in the rugged landscape. The second day of searching began at dawn on August 17th with expanded teams and improved coordination. However, despite the additional resources and systematic coverage of the area, no trace of TJ was found beyond his abandoned backpack. As the search entered its third day, the focus began to shift from rescue to recovery operations. The harsh reality was that a 9-year-old boy could not survive indefinitely in the mountain wilderness without proper supplies, shelter, and protection from wildlife. However, TJ's family and the Cedar Ridge community refused to give up hope. The search continued for 2 weeks, with hundreds of volunteers and professionals examining every accessible area within a 20-mile radius of the village. Cave systems were mapped and explored, ravines were searched systematically, and every possible hiding place was investigated. Despite the extensive efforts, no trace of TJ Walker was found. The case was eventually classified as a missing person investigation rather than a rescue operation, though periodic searches continued whenever new information or theories emerged. The disappearance of TJ Walker had a profound impact on the Cedar Ridge community. The close-knit village had never experienced such a tragedy, and the loss of the bright, adventurous boy affected everyone who had known him. The investigation was about to enter a long dormant period, with occasional searches and periodic reviews but no significant developments. The truth about TJ's fate lay hidden in the mountains he had loved to explore, concealed in a place that would not be discovered until an unexpected visitor arrived in the wilderness 3 years later. Chapter 3: The Long Search. As autumn settled over the mountains of northwestern Montana in 1991, the intensive search for TJ Walker had evolved into a more methodical, long-term investigation coordinated by the Flathead County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Harrison had been assigned to manage the case full-time, working with state agencies and volunteer organizations to maintain systematic search efforts. The investigation had attracted attention from throughout Montana and beyond, with experienced search and rescue teams volunteering their services and expertise. The National Association for Search and Rescue had designated TJ's case as a priority, providing specialized equipment and technical expertise for examining the challenging terrain around Cedar Ridge. The search efforts had been organized into phases, with teams systematically examining different areas based on probability analysis and terrain accessibility. Computer modeling had been used to predict TJ's most likely routes and destinations, though the vast wilderness area meant that even focused searches required enormous resources. Phase 1 had concentrated on areas within a 5-mile radius of Cedar Ridge, focusing on trails, water sources, and known landmarks that TJ might have visited. This phase had been completed by late September 1991, with every accessible area thoroughly examined by ground teams and aerial reconnaissance. Phase 2 expanded the search to a 10-mile radius, including more remote and dangerous terrain that would have been challenging for a 9-year-old to reach on foot. This phase required specialized climbing and cave rescue teams to access areas that could not be safely examined by regular search volunteers. The cave systems in the area received particular attention, as TJ's known interest in underground exploration made them likely destinations for his adventures. Professional cavers mapped and explored dozens of caves and rock formations, documenting their findings and searching for any signs of TJ's presence. However, the cave exploration revealed the enormous complexity of the underground systems in the limestone-rich geology of the region. Many caves had multiple chambers, interconnected passages, and areas that were accessible only through technical climbing or specialized equipment. One cave system that drew particular attention was the Bear Creek Cave Complex, located approximately 4 miles northeast of Cedar Ridge in the direction TJ had been traveling. The complex included multiple entrances and a network of passages that extended deep into the mountain, some of which had never been fully explored. The initial exploration of Bear Creek Cave revealed that the system was larger and more complex than previously realized. Professional cavers spent several days mapping the passages and searching for any evidence of TJ's presence, though their efforts were hampered by the cave's technical difficulty and potential dangers. The cave exploration teams found no immediate evidence of TJ's presence, though they noted that some areas of the complex were inaccessible without specialized equipment and could not be thoroughly searched during the initial investigation. The caves were marked for future exploration if additional resources became available. As winter approached, the active search efforts were suspended due to dangerous weather conditions and the arrival of snow that made many areas inaccessible. However, the investigation continued with analysis of evidence, review of witness statements, and planning for resumed search efforts in the spring. The winter of 1991 to 1992 was particularly harsh in northwestern Montana, with heavy snowfall and extreme cold that persisted well into March. The conditions made it impossible to conduct meaningful search operations and raised serious concerns about TJ's chances of survival if he had somehow found shelter in the wilderness. Samuel Walker spent the winter months reviewing maps and planning additional search strategies for the following year. Despite his grief and the apparent hopelessness of the situation, he remained convinced that TJ might have found a way to survive and was waiting to be discovered in some hidden location. The Cedar Ridge community established a support fund for continued search efforts and for Samuel Walker, who had been unable to work due to his involvement in the investigation. The fund received donations from throughout Montana and from search and rescue organizations across the United States. Spring 1992 brought renewed hope and resumed search activities, though the focus had shifted from immediate rescue to long-term recovery efforts. New volunteer teams joined the effort, and additional areas were identified for systematic examination. The spring searches included areas that had been inaccessible during the previous year due to snow or dangerous conditions. However, despite the expanded efforts and improved weather conditions, no new evidence related to TJ's disappearance was discovered. As 1992 progressed, the investigation began to attract attention from national media outlets and missing persons organizations. TJ's case was featured on television programs and in magazine articles, generating tips and leads from across the country, though none provided significant new information. The media attention also brought additional volunteers and resources to the search efforts, including experienced trackers, professional climbers, and technical specialists who donated their time and expertise to the investigation. One group that became particularly involved in the search was the American Cave Exploration Society, whose members had extensive experience in mapping and exploring complex cave systems. The organization committed significant resources to examining the underground features around Cedar Ridge. The cave exploration efforts expanded to include systems that had been considered too dangerous or remote for initial searches. Advanced mapping techniques and specialized equipment allowed teams to examine areas that had previously been inaccessible. However, despite the enhanced capabilities and systematic approach, the cave exploration teams continued to find no evidence of TJ's presence. The investigation began to consider the possibility that TJ had traveled farther from Cedar Ridge than initially believed, or that he had encountered some fate that left no discoverable trace. As 1993 began, 2 years after TJ's disappearance, the active search efforts were scaled back due to resource constraints and the lack of new leads. The case remained open, and periodic searches were conducted when new information emerged, but the intensive daily operations were no longer sustainable. The investigation had generated thousands of pages of reports, involved hundreds of volunteers, and covered hundreds of square miles of rugged terrain. Despite the extensive efforts, TJ Walker remained missing, and his fate remained unknown. Samuel Walker had aged significantly during the 2 years of searching for his grandson. The stress and grief had taken a toll on his health, and he had been forced to accept that TJ might never be found. However, he continued to hope that someday answers would emerge. The Cedar Ridge community had been forever changed by TJ's disappearance. The close-knit village had lost not only a beloved child, but also their sense of security and their confidence in the wilderness that had been their home for generations. As 1994 began, 3 years after TJ's disappearance, it seemed increasingly likely that the case would remain unsolved. The mountain wilderness had apparently claimed the adventurous 9-year-old, leaving behind only questions and the painful uncertainty that haunted everyone who had known him. However, the answers that everyone sought were waiting in the depths of the Bear Creek Cave complex, hidden in chambers that had not been fully explored and concealed by geological features that had protected their secrets for 3 long years. The truth about T.J. Walker's fate would finally emerge when an unexpected visitor discovered what the professional search teams had been unable to find. Chapter 4. The Case Goes Cold. By the summer of 1993, 2 years after T.J. Walker's disappearance, the investigation had officially transitioned to cold case status. Deputy Harrison had been reassigned to regular patrol duties but continued to review T.J.'s file periodically and respond to any new tips or reported sightings that emerged. The Flathead County Sheriff's Office had expended over $200,000 in direct costs for the search operations, not including the value of donated services and volunteer time. The investigation had been one of the most extensive in Montana's history, involving over 300 professional searchers and volunteers who had examined more than 500 square miles of wilderness terrain. Samuel Walker had been forced to accept the reality that T.J. might never be found, though he continued to hope that someday answers would emerge. The 70-year-old grandfather had suffered significant health problems related to the stress of his grandson's disappearance and his intensive involvement in the search efforts. The Cedar Ridge community had established a memorial fund in T.J.'s honor, providing scholarships for local children and supporting wilderness safety education programs. The fund also maintained resources for resuming search activities if new information ever emerged about T.J.'s fate. The case had influenced changes in wilderness safety procedures and search protocols throughout Montana. The extensive search efforts had revealed gaps in coordination between agencies and had led to improved training and equipment for mountain rescue operations. The American Cave Exploration Society had completed its systematic examination of cave systems in the Cedar Ridge area, producing detailed maps and documentation of underground features that had never been previously surveyed. However, despite their thorough efforts, no evidence of T.J.'s presence had been discovered. The cave exploration had revealed that the Bear Creek Cave complex was significantly larger and more intricate than anyone had realized. The system included multiple levels, interconnected passages, and chambers that extended deep into the mountain through geological formations that had been developing for thousands of years. However, the most remote areas of the cave complex remained inaccessible to search teams due to technical difficulties, dangerous conditions, and the specialized equipment required for safe exploration. Some chambers could only be reached through narrow passages or difficult climbs that were beyond the capabilities of most cavers. As 1994 began, 3 years after T.J.'s disappearance, the case had essentially reached a standstill. The physical searches had been exhausted, the tips and leads had been investigated, and no new theories or evidence had emerged to justify continued active operations. The investigation files were transferred to the Montana State Police Cold Case Unit, where they would be reviewed periodically and cross-referenced with any similar cases or new developments in search and rescue technology. However, no active investigative work was being conducted. The impact of T.J.'s disappearance extended beyond the immediate investigation. The case had become part of wilderness safety training programs and had influenced how search and rescue operations were conducted in remote areas throughout the western United States. Samuel Walker had moved from the family cabin to a smaller home in Cedar Ridge, finding it too difficult to remain in the place where he and T.J. had shared so many memories. The cabin stood empty, a reminder of the bright, adventurous boy who had vanished into the mountain wilderness. The village of Cedar Ridge had slowly returned to its normal routines, though T.J.'s absence remained a constant presence in the thoughts and conversations of the residents. The annual community gatherings now included memorial services for T.J., and his story had become part of the village's collective memory. The wilderness around Cedar Ridge continued to attract occasional visitors, including hunters, fishermen, and outdoor enthusiasts who were drawn to the area's pristine natural environment. However, the remote location and difficult access meant that few people ventured into the more distant areas where T.J. had disappeared. Among the occasional visitors to the region were professional explorers and adventure seekers who were attracted to the challenging terrain and unexplored areas. The Bear Creek Cave Complex, in particular, had gained attention among experienced cavers who were interested in mapping and exploring its most remote chambers. One such explorer was Dr. Elena Martinez, a 34-year-old geologist and professional caver from Colorado who specialized in studying underground water systems and geological formations. Dr. Martinez had been conducting research on cave systems throughout the Rocky Mountain region and had become interested in the Bear Creek complex. Dr. Martinez had extensive experience in technical cave exploration and possessed the specialized equipment and skills necessary to access areas that had been beyond the reach of the search teams. Her research focused on areas where geological activity had created unique formations and underground water features. In the spring of 1994, Dr. Martinez had begun planning an expedition to explore the deepest and most remote areas of the Bear Creek Cave complex. Her research suggested that the system might contain chambers and passages that had never been documented, potentially providing new insights into the geological history of the region. The expedition would require several days of technical climbing and cave exploration, using advanced equipment and techniques that had not been available during the original search efforts. Dr. Martinez planned to map previously unexplored areas and document any geological features of scientific interest. However, Dr. Martinez was unaware of the connection between the Bear Creek Cave complex and T.J. Walker's disappearance 3 years earlier. Her research had focused on geological rather than historical aspects of the cave system, and she had not reviewed the extensive documentation generated during the search operations. As Dr. Martinez prepared for her expedition in the summer of 1994, she had no idea that she was about to make a discovery that would finally provide answers to one of Montana's most perplexing missing person cases. The truth about T.J. Walker's fate was waiting in the depths of the cave system he had loved to explore, concealed in chambers that no one had been able to reach until the right person arrived with the proper skills and equipment. Chapter 5. The Discovery in the Cave. July 18, 1994. 3 years and 11 days after T.J. Walker vanished from the mountain trails around Cedar Ridge, Dr. Elena Martinez was beginning the 3rd day of her solo expedition to map the deepest chambers of the Bear Creek Cave complex. As a professional geologist and experienced technical caver, Martinez had spent the previous 2 days documenting previously unexplored sections of the massive underground system. Martinez had established a base camp near the main entrance of the Bear Creek Cave complex, approximately 4 miles northeast of Cedar Ridge. Her expedition was part of a broader research project studying underground water systems in Montana's limestone regions, and the Bear Creek system had attracted her attention due to its size and complexity. The cave exploration required advanced technical skills and specialized equipment, including climbing gear, underwater breathing apparatus, and sophisticated mapping tools. Martinez was one of only a few dozen cavers in North America with the experience and equipment necessary to safely explore the most challenging areas of such systems. On her 3rd day in the cave, Martinez was exploring a section of the complex that required rappelling down a 60-foot vertical shaft to reach a series of chambers that had never been documented. The descent was technically demanding and potentially dangerous, requiring careful anchoring and rope work in the limestone environment. The chamber at the bottom of the shaft was larger than Martinez had expected, measuring approximately 40 feet long by 20 feet wide with a ceiling that extended beyond the reach of her powerful headlamp. The walls showed evidence of significant water activity over geological time periods, with formations that indicated the chamber had been carved by underground streams. As Martinez began mapping the chamber and documenting its geological features, her headlamp illuminated something unusual in a corner where debris and sediment had accumulated over many years. Among the natural materials, she could make out what appeared to be artificial objects that were inconsistent with the cave's natural environment. Moving closer to investigate, Martinez discovered what appeared to be a makeshift campsite that had been established in the corner of the chamber. The site included a sleeping area created with pine boughs and fabric, a small fire pit constructed from cave stones, and a collection of containers and supplies that appeared to have been brought from outside the cave. Most significantly, Martinez found personal items that clearly belonged to a child. Small clothing items, a compass, a whistle, and other supplies that suggested someone young had been living in the chamber for an extended period. The items showed signs of long-term use and were arranged in a way that indicated careful organization and planning. Martinez immediately recognized the potential significance of her discovery, particularly given the remote location of the chamber and the apparent age of the items. She carefully documented the scene with photographs and detailed notes, while avoiding disturbing the arrangement of objects until appropriate authorities could examine the site. Among the items Martinez discovered was a small notebook that appeared to contain handwritten entries. The notebook was water-damaged and partially deteriorated, but much of the writing remained legible. The entries were written in a child's handwriting and documented daily activities, thoughts, and survival efforts over a period of several weeks. The notebook's first entry was dated August 16, 1991, the day after T.J. Walker had disappeared from Cedar Ridge. The entry described falling into a hole while exploring near the limestone cliffs and finding himself trapped in an underground chamber with no apparent way to escape to the surface. Subsequent entries documented T.J.'s remarkable survival efforts over the following weeks. The 9-year-old had used his wilderness skills and the limited resources available in the cave to create shelter, find water sources, and sustain himself while hoping for rescue that never came. The journal revealed that T.J. had survived for approximately 6 weeks in the cave chamber, using his knowledge of wilderness survival to extend his life far beyond what anyone might have expected. He had created tools from cave materials, rationed the food supplies he had been carrying, and found sources of fresh water from underground streams. However, the final entries in the journal, dated in early October 1991, revealed that T.J.'s health was declining and that he was losing hope of ever being rescued. The remote location of the chamber, accessible only through technical climbing, had made it impossible for search teams to discover him despite their extensive efforts. Martinez found T.J.'s remains in the sleeping area he had created, positioned as if he had simply gone to sleep and never awakened. The preservation conditions in the cave had maintained the evidence of his survival efforts and final days, providing a complete picture of his remarkable but ultimately unsuccessful fight for survival. The discovery provided answers to questions that had haunted the Cedar Ridge community and T.J.'s family for 3 years. However, the knowledge that T.J. had survived for weeks while search teams passed overhead was both comforting and heartbreaking for those who had never stopped looking for him. Martinez immediately contacted the Flathead County Sheriff's Office using her satellite communication equipment, reporting the discovery and requesting that appropriate personnel be dispatched to the cave system. The recovery operation would require the same technical skills that had been necessary for Martinez to reach the chamber. Deputy Harrison, who had maintained involvement in T.J.'s case despite its cold status, coordinated the recovery effort with cave rescue specialists and county medical examiner personnel. The operation took 2 days to complete, as T.J.'s remains and possessions had to be carefully extracted through the vertical shaft and transported to the surface. The journal and other evidence were examined by forensic specialists, confirming the timeline and circumstances of T.J.'s survival efforts. The analysis revealed that T.J. had demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness and maturity in his attempts to survive, using skills that his grandfather had taught him about wilderness living. The discovery finally provided closure for Samuel Walker, who had spent 3 years wondering about his grandson's fate. While the knowledge that T.J. had survived for weeks was comforting, the realization that rescue had been so close yet impossible was difficult to accept. The investigation revealed that the chamber where T.J. had been trapped was accessible only through technical rappelling skills that were beyond the capabilities of a 9-year-old child. Once he had fallen into the chamber, there was no way for him to climb out without specialized equipment and assistance. The professional search teams had actually been close to discovering T.J.'s location during the original investigation. However, the vertical shaft leading to his chamber had appeared to be just another of the many dead-end passages that characterized the cave system, and the search protocols had not included rappelling into every possible opening. T.J.'s funeral was held in Cedar Ridge with over 200 people in attendance, including many of the volunteers who had participated in the original search efforts. The service celebrated T.J.'s adventurous spirit and his remarkable survival abilities, while acknowledging the tragedy of his loss. The case became a landmark in search and rescue operations, leading to improved procedures for cave exploration during missing person investigations. T.J.'s journal was studied by survival experts and became part of training materials for wilderness education programs. Dr. Martinez was recognized for her crucial role in finally solving one of Montana's most perplexing missing person cases. Her technical expertise and dedication to thorough exploration had succeeded where hundreds of other searchers had been unable to reach. The Bear Creek Cave Complex was permanently closed to recreational exploration, with the entrance to T.J.'s chamber sealed to preserve it as a memorial. A plaque was installed at the cave entrance honoring T.J.'s memory and recognizing the volunteers who had searched for him. Samuel Walker lived for 2 more years after T.J.'s discovery, finally having the answers he had sought for so long. He was buried next to his grandson in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery, reunited with a boy who had been the center of his world. T.J. Walker's story became a reminder of both the dangers and the wonders of wilderness exploration. His remarkable survival efforts in the cave chamber demonstrated the value of wilderness education and the strength of the human spirit, even in the most desperate circumstances. The makeshift camp that T.J. had created in the depths of the Bear Creek Cave complex stood as a testament to his courage, resourcefulness, and determination to survive. Though rescue had ultimately come too late, his story inspired improvements in search procedures that would help ensure that other lost children might be found in time.